when I've done the oral history at the Victorian Bar, I've interviewed people who spoke magistrates in the 40s and the 50s who certainly didn't study law at university, had done the solicitor's admission exams or equivalent, but they regarded those people as in some ways the superior practitioners. They said they had a far better knowledge of human nature than people who'd gone to university. Do you tend to agree with that?
Thoroughly, and I had part of it. And you're absolutely right, but the thing was, by appearing in those courts, they got known by the magistrates, but more importantly, they got pally with the police prosecutors and pally with the detectives involved, so that when they knew how to bargain and get the right facts. I never questioned too much what went on, but from a very strong brief, with some chinks, it would come out differently, so that when it was presented to the magistrate. Now, Monty Stafford was another one, another great advocate, and Finlay. Old Mervyn Finlay was a champion advocate, but he was very proper. Adrian was rough and tumble, and many of them were, all in the suburban courts. And they had to deal with the police, doing criminal work mainly. They did other work too. But in the criminal work, they formed a bond with the police so that it was all fair and square and above board, and with the police prosecutors overlooking it. But there was a great family atmosphere, and I was privileged when admitted to be in that, because I was with Adrian Twigg and Company for 6 or 7 years, and I was privileged to be thrown into that, but immediately they treated me in the same way. I was the son of their old mate, and I was treated with respect. And then, of course, I had to treat them with respect because they gave me confidences about the matter. It had to be confident and secret. Therefore, we got bargains, and some evidence didn't come out, some was glossed, and it was a lovely way to do business. I learnt a lot about human nature. But the bad side of it was, my mother complained bitterly because Adrian would get calls on Sunday night from some criminal who'd been a customer before, and he's down at Central with the police. And I remember him though, he sometimes would get very tired, and he'd say, no, ring me at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Ring me at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and the phone would be almost down, the bloke still talking. Adrian would chop him off. His weekends were sacrosanct.
Well, it's an extremely tiring business. I have talked to people too, though, who said that while that was an excellent grounding, if you like, in human nature, and obviously the business of, as you put it, the bargaining that obviously needed to take place, there did lead to perceptions of corruption at times, and that caused a desire to see the magistracy, certainly, to become a more professionalised approach to sort of do away with that. Certainly they tried to do away with that in Victoria.
Look, you're correct, but don't highlight it too much, because for all that so-called corruption, and it's not corruption in the worst sense of that word, no one did anything wrong. They just said, well, X, Y and Z. Well, I've got a different view, so that it would be a watered-down view of those facts that would go in. And the magistrates were very intelligent. They'd come up the same tough way, and so they knew their law, they knew it in practice. Vastly different, I think, from some of them today, but never mind, who are perhaps erudite but didn't have that rough and tumble background that was absolutely necessary to understand human nature.
You weren't, of course, initially setting out to be a lawyer. You wanted to be a doctor, I believe.
Yes, they quickly scotched that, but I wanted to have the noble profession, and that the man who's Don Cam that I just showed you, he did medicine, and he was my closest mate. I wanted to also, but Adrian was a very strong-minded person, and he wanted his family to take on the practice to the extent that those solicitors of more senior age were never made partners. They had the right of private practice and the use of all the facility, but Adrian kept it for his 2 sons so that the name Adrian Twigg and Company would be preserved. And it is sad that it's gone now.
I'm looking at a very charming picture of, well, it could be you were telling me, but it's in fact your father wearing a wig and gown. And he's how old in this picture?
8.
8.
And look at the pince-nez. Just he hasn't got a good grasp on them. And the little brief, which is just a piece of paper probably, in his left hand.
It's a charming photo. So his own forebears were heavily involved in law as well?
Oh, no.
So how did he come by that cut-down gown and jabot and wig?
I think because he had a yen even then, but I think his father Albert, who was a failed auctioneer and went bankrupt, he wanted his son to be something, so he did. And his elder brother, Adrian's elder brother, went into business, and that was enough for Albert, the father.
I understand your father was an article clerk to, you say here, a prominent police court lawyer, Jim Abigail. So he would have learned a lot from Jim Abigail.
Jim Abigail was a star advocate, and he certainly learned a lot from him. And Jim Abigail had that same touch with the police and so forth that I spoke about earlier. Abigail is a famous name. His son was in the law again too. But more importantly, Adrian Twigg and Company, or Adrian C.R. Twigg as he then was, had a branch practice at Newtown, where all was a rough and tumble area in those days. Very rough and tumble. It's getting a bit elite now. And the police court practice there burgeoned because the crime was there, they had good prosecutors, good police, and it worked very well. And I was privileged to come into that and learn all about it at grassroots level.
Did you happen to watch that program that was airing on television last year, Underbelly Razor, which was set in that whole grimy period of Sydney in the 20s and 30s and 40s? Did your father have much dealings with Tilly Devine and all those other colourful characters?
Oh, no, because he was sensible enough not to mix with those people. They were just names, really. But I saw a lot of that and read a lot about it. What you get now is more myth than reality. They gloss it over because it makes good reading. But it was hard work and tough work, and there wasn't as much crime as there is now. No one goes around every night firing bullets, although Bumper Farrow was pretty good at getting rid of the razor gangs in the 1930s. But it was a tough time, of course, between wars, depression and the like. But post-war, it was more rough and tumble with the police. You got to know them and you got the facts right. I learnt cross-examination from my father because he was very good at it. I'll tell you one story about it because he did what we used to call DUI, drive under the influence. It's got a different name now, of course, PCA. And the police had a set pattern. His eyes were bloodshot, he was unsteady on his feet, his breath smelled strongly of alcohol. Eyes bloodshot, said Adrian. Yes. What about my client? Yes, certainly. He had bloodshot eyes, which, as they are now, oh no, much more bloodshot than they are today. Defendant, stand up and take out your glass eye from the left side.
I get the impression your father thought best on his feet.
He certainly did.